Hey, what's up? This is cool. It's really cool to see this whole process break down because you did a great job following people's advice, and it's also really tough to keep taking advice, especially from different people, and like watching the whole thing progress is really cool. Um, this is the final you initially sent me, and I think I had a thought about this, but I wanted to see the whole process. I really also appreciate how you explained kind of what happened in each step because that really helps me to understand why you made certain decisions, and so that's really cool. Um, and I'm judging this based exactly and only on could I hire this guy tomorrow and what would be stopping me. So I'm not judging based on a metric of like, is it professional concept art? If absolutely is. Is it good enough to get a job? For sure. Um, I'm just saying compared to the crack team of superheroes I'm working with right now, what would this need to just get that last little bump to their level? Not that it needs a ton of work, but there are little things that are kind of important. Um, one of the things when I first looked at this is it's really nice not to be able to tell what's 3D, what's photo, and what's what. So my first instinct would be things like when you have something that's kind of on the realistic side, um, you have grass that is like with a brush like that, it doesn't look that great. So it needs to be a little bit more realistic to match this. Do you know what I mean? And everything needs to be seasoned to taste a little bit. I would talk to Florent about this, but I know he does like a little bit of a smart blur with like a 0.02 or a surface blur. These tiny little blurs on certain things where maybe that gets blurred zero point 0.2 on a surface blur just to push it back a little bit. Um, and to get everything kind of be like the same sharpness. That little stuff like that really helps to push things back and pull things forward. And integrate things because I feel like, for example, this cloud is too photo-y, considering the whole picture isn't 100% photoreal. Um, I think the cloud then would be a little bit too photo-y, so I do a little something to that. Um, for example, with a cloud like that, I think you could actually get away with quite a bit of quite a bit of looseness. Whoops. Let's grab this brush. You know what I mean? Like even if a cloud had like a kind of a furry edge to it in places, and you wouldn't have to do it everywhere, but let's say you got it in some places, um, it wouldn't break the feeling of cloud, and it would do little things like that would do a lot to like make the whole picture feel a little bit more integrated with each other. Especially this right here feels a little too photo bashy. Um, so you might want to put like a couple blurs on there and put a few paint strokes in there to make it a little bit less crisp because this looks really crisp 3D and this looks kind of photo-y. So you just want to use your eye to kind of season all those things a little bit to make them match each other a little bit more. The other big thing that I noticed when I first looked at this was that these these things are a little bit distracting, especially the one that comes out that way. So I might just have them. If it was up to me, I might like put them all, right here, right next to each other, even, just so that it's about because they're kind of focused on that dude up there. Now I didn't know that dude was a focal point, and I'll talk about that when I get to the other things. That would make a little bit more sense from far away. Um, Also, with a temple that's this kind of built up, there's some logic issues. Like I don't understand why there's greenery up here. Where did it come from? Where did this greenery come from? It stands to reason that greenery grows from the ground, right? So if there was any greenery, it would come from the ground and kind of grow up. But also, this temple doesn't look like it's in disuse. It doesn't look like it's been abandoned or anything. So all these like extreme even this overgrownness on the stairs doesn't quite make sense. This is a temple that is like well kept, right? So even if it was old and ancient, I suppose it could have some overgrowth of greenery. That's possible, but I think it definitely wouldn't have all this grass growing in between the pieces and so much breakup in the stairs just because of the age of the temple. This area would be perfect for some like little bit of smart blur, surface blur, just to make that mix with that, so that you see how this is just a little bit blurry and this is a little bit sharp. That's the kind of thing that it's all little tiny things, but once they all sync together, it's great. Okay, so talking about the beginning, so this initial way of working, you got amazing feedback from Florent when he came to Toronto and make it more interesting. I think this is a decent composition, and it's nice to see the 3D because it's all consistent, right? It looks like one level of finish, which I kind of appreciate. Again, the one thing blowing in the wind, I don't know if it's that necessary. And it seems like you already have a person in here. But here's a problem with this, and I'll mention it actually more in a later one. Actually, let me comment on, say, like, yes, these little things, it's interesting that you added this piece that sticks out, but I don't know if it makes sense. I don't see how the culture that made this rough-hewn stone made this looks like it's a different material from a different time, from a spaceship or something. All the rest feels like it goes with itself, but this feels like something a little bit different, especially the way it's like plopped on. So that's just from a design perspective. I might move that out of the way. Um, Same with these statues. I think they're cool, but maybe I want to see what a Middle Eastern. It looks kind of Middle Eastern-y, so I'm curious what a more Middle Eastern design for a statue would be. By the way, none of these changes I'm telling you to do right now. I think this image is done. I think you can move on. I'm just saying in retrospect, looking back at it. These are just initial thoughts. The fact that this is made of wood, looking like, is a little confusing, because why would a stone structure build a base for a stone statue made out of wood? And if the guys are wood, it's a little bit weird that the statues would be made out of wood. So I think from just an overall design perspective, and by the way, the final doesn't have any of these problems. I'm critiquing this render because the final kind of, just because it got more fleshed out and the camera moved, it solves it a little bit. But I think it's worth, for the future, thinking about like just those little bit of logic things. What's the whole layout? Like, who lives here? Why is this built into the rock wall? And why is it not connected? You know what I mean? Like, is this a walkway or something? And they carved it out of the rock wall? But then if they carved it out of the rock wall, they built it out of wood, carved into the rock wall. If you look at Petra, for example, anything that's carved into the rock is probably going to be made out of rock with maybe some wood additions, especially since this is all made of stone. You know, there's like weird little logic things like that. That's cool. Not sure what the reason for this one was, but it's still fine to see. Modeled out the scene in Cinema 4D and rendered in Octane. The goal with the 3D, this 3D render looks a little bit whack. It looks like it's not, there's something wrong with the render. Because it doesn't have, first of all, there's a bloom on it, which is a little awkward. It looks like it's not getting ambient occlusion, like in a nice way in all these areas. And I'm not sure if it's just a render setting. It looks weird that it is so bright here, and it doesn't look like this is being lit by the sky. It doesn't feel like there's blue light lighting everything. I'm not sure why the render looks weird. I wonder if you just did something or moved a bunch of lights or did something other than just naturalistic lighting. And this is just a personal preference. I always prefer just naturalistic lighting, and it looks almost like it's game lit in the shadows area. It doesn't look like it's getting cool ambient from the sky with this warm light hitting here, and it's got this weird bloom. Also, I think an important thing to do is what Matteo did in the next step, which is get the render to look exactly like the composition you want. So you had that render, right? And Matteo did this. Now this, this is awesome. If it had stuck to this, it would have been awesome. And this is just a classic, vintage mistake that happens, which is annoying and it sucks, but it's like, it just happens. And I don't know why. But this composition is done. It's done. Why? Because it's so clearly readable. I can see that it's about this awesome palace. I can see the palace. See, your instincts are right. Matteo's instincts are right, for sure. But you accepting this and being like, yeah, it's amazing to focus on more story. You understand what's happening. Gave some amazing advice to focus on more story, right? You're right to say that because that's exactly what happens. Because we can see this guy now. He's on a dark background. White shirt. Super obvious. Super obvious. And you're like, oh yeah, clear story. But that's the whole point. You got to keep it exactly like that for it to work. And then you go to the final, and the fucking focal point is here. You're not listening to your own advice on your own comp that you already liked and got, and you ruined it. Now, it's not a big deal. I'm being dramatic, but I didn't even know this guy was important in this picture. How did you know that it was awesome, nice read here, and then not know it later. You learned less as you went. You know what I'm saying? And this is a classic thing that happens. I call it add a helicopter syndrome. You have a concept comp that's perfectly working great, and then you add a helicopter, and now you've put another focal point into the fucking image. Like what? No, no. It was done. It was figured out. Once you have a figured out comp, it's done. You don't fucking touch it. You don't change a thing that's going to mess with the comp. And if you understood too, when you're looking at this, you're saying, well, why does this work? Why does this work? Well, because he's light on dark. It's that simple. He's light on dark, and you can see his fucking pose, and you get it. Yeah, he's light on dark. He's standing in front of the building, light on dark. And then in the final, there's like a dark on light underneath that's supposed to be light on dark, and the light on dark is no longer existing, and this thing moved too. And this guy is like the focal point. So if you look at the dark and light of this, the whole storytelling changes because this is the brightest contrast. It's some kind of Jesus figure, and he's going to interact with this dude, kind of. But this dude doesn't look like a king. He looks like he's opening the door. The whole thing gets destroyed, storytelling wise. And this is perfectly clear. So what you should have done is once you had this, be so goddamn careful not to change a millimeter unless you really know what you're doing. Unless you really know why you're making this image, what works about it, and what you're going to change. So this worked great. This, you kept the things in mind, but you got to see it. If it doesn't read like from this far away, you see how like this image right here, and you have to look at it from far away to gauge it. This image right here, it's like super clear that you see this and you see this even from far away. So you move the camera and you added all these characters, right? But you didn't account for the fact that now this little black thing from far away that's on the light sky, that contrast is the whole reason it's a read. Now the dark thing's on a dark thing, so it's no longer a read. So you knew what the image was intellectually in your mind, but you forgot what the simple dumb idiot, so simple, and everyone forgets this, dark versus light readability things. You forgot about those because in your mind you're like, oh, it's like, yeah, I know that this thing is there, so obviously the viewer's gonna know. The viewer's not gonna know. You need to make it this dumb. You need to make it this dumb. Dark on light, light on dark. Duh, duh. And here, white, light, 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 light. So is it about all these guys now? And this guy's not even light enough anymore to read. So keep pulling back, keep looking at it like that. This one, if we're just looking at it again, now the main read is this flag, and then maybe this off flag, which I don't know why. Still can't see it. And so now you had to do like an extreme hack to make the whole thing work again, which is make the background super light. You see how here the little litter was on top of the white cloud, so it was fine. You didn't need that much lightness back here. But now here, because you moved it just a little bit, now you had to white the whole background to make the same thing happen that already worked over here. And it's still cool. It still feels cool. And here too. Here it got like a little bit, you have a light background on the dark thing and you can see it a little better. I almost like this one even a little bit better than this one because at least this one gets back to kind of the reads. I would still probably, now it could be fixed, right? You could, if you kept this composition, and then you could get in here, get some white up in this. Do you know what I mean? And you could remember what worked about it, but you say to yourself, hey, I want a closer camera. Okay, well, you still have to make sure that these two things are in good contrast, and then you can make it work. Does that make sense? And then these guys are a strong read, but they aren't as strong as this is now and this is. These two things kind of supersede. And it doesn't take that much to make something super pop. Like if there was an element underneath that got really dark, it would read even stronger. So you're getting, your instincts are good, and you're getting it right, but then you're later forgetting and getting caught up in the picture and forgetting what the point of the picture is and that what your reads even are, that they're even important. And that's an easy fix because all you have to do is just be aware of that next time. So two things. One, the integration thing and the believability, like understand the time period and what it is about the grass and stuff and making all the things integrated. And then two, once you get the reads that work, don't fucking deviate from them. or or if you do know what you're doing, remember that these worked for what and for what reasons. And okay, you want to move the camera, but you want to keep this guy really light so that he's light on dark like you had him. Cool. Alrighty. Thanks, dude. Really great progress though, and I'll talk soon.